A 15-year-old boy is dying. His body burns from the inside. Sweat pours down his skin in rivulets. His 16-year-old wife kneels beside him, whispering desperate prayers. 6 days ago, he had been healthy. Now, something was consuming him, and no one knew what. This is Prince Arthur Tudor, the boy born to be king. And when centuries later they opened his coffin, what they found made historians question everything. But the real question is, what killed Arthur? Was it plague? A deadly virus? Poison? And what if he had survived that day? No Henry VIII, no 6 wives, no beheadings, no Reformation ripping England apart. One mysterious illness, one twist of fate, one sudden death that rewrote 5 centuries of history. A gentle prince vanished, and in his place rose a tyrant who would tear England apart. Because Arthur's death planted a dark obsession in his family, an obsession with heirs that haunted the Tudors until death. If you love history mysteries like this, hit that like button right now. It really helps this channel grow. And share this story with other history lovers like you. Years before Arthur's birth, England was bleeding. 2 families had torn the country apart for decades, Lancaster and York. Both wanted the throne. Both believed God had chosen them to rule. They called it the Wars of the Roses. Thousands died in muddy fields. Brothers killed brothers. Fathers watched sons fall. Then, in August 1485, something unexpected happened. A man named Henry Tudor, a Lancastrian with a weak claim to the throne, faced the Yorkist king, Richard III, at Bosworth Field. Richard III charged across the battlefield, sword raised, aiming to strike Henry down, end the rebellion with one stroke. But he never made it. Henry Tudor became king. The war was finally over, but England was broken, exhausted, torn apart by decades of civil war. Nobody trusted anyone. The throne had changed hands so many times that no one truly believed it was safe, not even the man who sat on it. Henry knew his power was fragile. His claim wasn't strong. His enemies lurked everywhere. He needed to unite the 2 families. So he married Elizabeth of York, niece of the dead king, daughter of Edward IV, sister to the missing princes in the Tower. A Lancastrian king, a Yorkist queen, their marriage was political, but it was also necessary. When Elizabeth became pregnant, Henry finally allowed himself to hope. Everything depended on this child. The baby arrived healthy. People celebrated in the streets. Church bells rang across London. This was not just a royal birth. It was a promise, a new beginning. Arthur grew quickly. By age 3, he was made a Knight of the Bath, an ancient ceremony involving ritual bathing, all-night prayer vigils, and sacred oaths. Before most children could even read, Arthur received titles: Duke of Cornwall, Prince of Wales, Earl of Chester. They dressed him in miniature armor, placed a tiny sword in his hand, and led him down the River Thames on the royal barge while crowds cheered from the banks. Everyone said the same thing: this boy will save England. But there was another boy in the nursery, Henry, born 4 years after Arthur, the spare, the backup. He didn't matter as much. Arthur studied with the best tutors in Europe. Henry practiced sword fighting and played. Arthur learned Latin, French, history, philosophy. Henry learned to joust and hunt. Arthur was groomed to be king. Henry was groomed to exist. The brothers were close. They played together, laughed together, but everyone knew the truth. Only one would wear the crown. Arthur excelled at everything. Tutors marveled at his intelligence. He could debate in Latin, understand complex philosophy, recite the reigns of English kings from memory. He was also athletic, tall for his age, graceful, an excellent dancer who could entrance a room. His hair was red gold like his grandfather's Edward IV's. His eyes were small but bright. His manner was gentle. One observer wrote that Arthur was the most loving and true prince. But being a prince wasn't just about intelligence or kindness. Arthur needed to secure England's place in Europe. He needed to marry in Spain. Two powerful monarchs, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, ruled together. They had united their kingdoms through marriage and were now conquering the last Muslim territories in Granada. They had a daughter, Catherine of Aragon, born December 15, 1885, just 3 months after Arthur. Henry VII saw an opportunity. An alliance with Spain would protect England from France. It would give the Tudor family legitimacy. It would show Europe that England mattered. Negotiations began when Arthur was barely 2. The Spanish were interested, but cautious. Was this Tudor dynasty stable, or would it collapse like so many before it? For years, diplomats argued over details: dowries, marriage contracts, political guarantees. Finally, they reached an agreement. Arthur and Catherine would marry in August 1497, when Arthur was 10. The betrothal became official 2 years later. They married by proxy, with representatives standing during the ceremony. The real wedding would come later. But Arthur and Catherine began exchanging letters. They wrote in Latin. They had never met, yet they were learning about each other through words. Arthur wrote that he rejoiced at the thought of their marriage, that he felt deep affection for his future bride. Catherine wrote back with equal warmth. Two teenagers connected by politics, starting to feel something real. October 1501. Catherine of Aragon arrived in England. She was 16, having traveled for months across the sea and through foreign lands. Nervous, excited, terrified. Arthur was 15, now tall, handsome, accomplished. They met for the first time at Dogmersfield in Hampshire. Accounts say Arthur greeted her warmly, promising to be a loving and true husband. 2 weeks later, November 14, 1501, they married at St. Paul's Cathedral. The Archbishop of Canterbury performed the ceremony. Nobles from across Europe attended. The celebration lasted for days. That night, their marriage bed was blessed by the Bishop of London. Then everyone left them alone. What happened in that room became one of history's most debated questions. Did they consummate the marriage? Years later, this question would tear England apart. It would end a religious era. It would cause deaths and wars. But on that night in November 1501, nobody knew. They were just two teenagers, married for political reasons, trying to figure out their future together. For a month, Arthur and Catherine lived at Tichenhill Manor in Worcestershire. In December, they traveled to Ludlow Castle near the Welsh border, a fortress with strong walls, thick towers, and beautiful chambers. This was where Arthur would learn to govern Wales, where he would prove himself worthy of the crown. Catherine joined him. Together they established a household, hired servants, created routines. Arthur attended council meetings, made decisions, learned statecraft. Catherine supported him, learned English customs, and wrote letters to her parents in Spain. For 3 months, everything seemed perfect. But something was wrong. Since the wedding, Arthur had been weaker, not dramatically, just tired more easily. Catherine noticed, so did the servants, but nobody worried too much. Arthur was 15, growing, working hard. Of course he was tired. Then March arrived, and with it, death. Ludlow town had a problem. Disease moved through the streets. Some called it plague. Others blamed bad air or evil vapors. People were getting sick. Some recovered. Many did not. The disease crept closer to the castle. On March 27, 1502, Arthur collapsed. Fever burned through his body. He shook. Sweat poured from his skin. Catherine fell ill the same day. Both were confined to their chambers. Servants brought food and water. Royal physicians examined them, prescribed herbs and bloodletting. Nothing helped. The disease was called sweating sickness. Victims described it as feeling like their blood was boiling inside their veins. Heat radiated from their bodies. Sweat soaked through their clothes. Within minutes, many became delirious. They did not know where they were, could not recognize their own families. The sickness killed quickly. some died within hours. Catherine's body fought slowly. She began to recover. Arthur did not. For days, he suffered. Physicians tried everything: blooding, purging, herbal remedies. Priests came to pray. Servants begged God for mercy. One contemporary described it as the deadly corruption that utterly vanquished and overcame the pure and friendly blood. No medicine could stop it. No prayer could heal it. April 2nd, 1502. Dawn broke cold and gray over Ludlow Castle. Arthur Tudor died in his bed. He was 15 years old, married less than 5 months, Prince of Wales, born to be king. He would never be king. Messengers rode hard to Greenwich Palace to deliver the news to the king. Where Henry VIII and Elizabeth of York were staying, the news arrived late Monday night. The king, she was a mother who had just lost her firstborn. Her ladies-in-waiting panicked. They sent for the king. Henry VIII rushed to his wife's side. Now he had to comfort her. They held each other and wept. Back at Ludlow Castle, there was work to do. Arthur's body could not remain in his bed. Medieval custom required specific preparations. Physicians removed his internal organs, standard practice for royal bodies that needed to be transported and preserved. They filled his body cavity with expensive spices: cinnamon, cloves, frankincense. These would mask decay and preserve the flesh. Then they wrapped him in cloth and placed him in a wooden chest. The chest was covered with black fabric. A white cross marked the top. They moved him to a chamber in the castle, placing him on a table covered with rich gold cloth. Silver candlesticks surrounded him. Wax tapers burned constantly. 4 large candlesticks with massive candles stood at the corners. For 3 weeks, the body remained there, while arrangements were made. Meanwhile, Prince Henry, now 10, became heir to the throne. The spare had become the most important person in England. If Henry died, the Tudor dynasty died with him. The pressure was crushing. He felt every ounce of it. That weight, planted in childhood, would shape the man he became: a king obsessed with heirs, terrified of failure, willing to destroy anyone who stood in his way. April 23rd, 1502, St. George's Day. Instead of celebration, England mourned. Arthur's body was carried from Ludlow Castle to St. Lawrence's Church. The procession was grand, yet somber. Yeomen in black and gold bore his coffin. Bishops walked beside them, swinging incense. The Earl of Surrey led the mourners. None of Arthur's family attended. Royal custom forbade it. 2 Spanish noblemen from Catherine's household walked behind, representing the young widow's grief. For 3 days, prayers and masses filled the air. Alms were given to the poor. Arthur's heart, or perhaps his organs, were buried at St. Lawrence's, but the rest of his body still had one final journey: Worcester Cathedral, the burial place of English princes. The journey from Ludlow to Worcester was not far, maybe 30 miles, but the roads were treacherous. The body was placed on a chair, likely a kind of chariot, pulled by 6 horses draped in black cloth. Then the weather turned. Rain, wind, cold that cut through clothing. The roads became rivers of mud. The horses could not pull the weight. Oxen were brought in to drag the chariot. Mourners walked through the storm, soaked and freezing, but continued. One witness wrote, "The foulest cold, windy, and rainy day I have seen. Even nature seemed to mourn." Back at court, Henry VIII was shattered. He locked himself in his chamber, refusing to see anyone. Elizabeth of York comforted him, though her own heart was breaking far away. Catherine of Aragon, only 16, mourned in silence. Newly widowed and alone in a foreign land, she had shared a brief, awkward marriage. Yet Arthur had been kind, gentle. Now the halls of Ludlow felt like a tomb. Servants later said Catherine would sit for hours, staring out windows, whispering prayers in Spanish. She had lost her husband, her purpose, her future. She did not yet know that this tragedy would tie her forever to another Tudor prince. Meanwhile, mourners carried Arthur's young body away. After days of miserable travel, they reached Worcester Cathedral. The weather improved as they entered the city. Then came the burial. The Bishop of Lincoln wept as he cast holy water over the chest. Arthur's officers wept openly, breaking their staffs of office and throwing them into the grave. One witness wrote, "I had a hard heart that wept not." These men had known Arthur, served him, loved him. Now they were burying their prince. Sir William Audley, comptroller of Arthur's household, took his staff of office, held it over his head, snapped it in two, and threw the pieces into the grave. Sir Richard Croft, steward of Arthur's household, did the same. Gentlemen ushers broke their rods of office and added them to the grave. The grave was filled with earth. Arthur Tudor, Prince of Wales, was gone. Born September 14, 1886. Died April 2, 1502. Married less than 5 months. Dead at 15. But Arthur's story did not end there. Centuries later, scientists would make a shocking discovery beneath Worcester Cathedral. But first, you need to understand how his death changed the course of England's history. Arthur's death created ripples that spread across centuries. Remember Elizabeth of York's words to her husband, "We are still young enough to have more children." She meant them within weeks of Arthur's death. The 36-year-old queen was pregnant again. Too old for the dangers of childbirth, she knew the risk but took it. One last attempt to secure the Tudor line, one last hope for an heir, one desperate attempt to fill the void Arthur left behind. February 11, 1503, Elizabeth's 37th birthday. She went into labor and delivered a daughter. They named her Catherine after Arthur's widow. But something went wrong. Elizabeth of York died 9 days later. The baby followed her soon after. Henry VIII was destroyed. In less than a year, he had lost his firstborn son, his wife, and his peace of mind. The careful king became fearful, cold, obsessed with control, money, survival. Every decision he made afterward came from one thing: terror of losing it all again. Henry VIII had built everything on Arthur: the marriage to Spain, the promise of stability, the end of the Wars of the Roses. When Arthur died, the shrewd king became paranoid. He hoarded gold. He saw enemies in every corner. He could not trust a world that had stolen his perfect heir. 10-year-old Prince Henry watched it all unfold. One day he was the spare, free to joust, to play. The next, his brother was dead, his mother dying, and the entire kingdom's survival rested on his shoulders. Henry VIII didn't just inherit a crown, he inherited a weight no child should carry. Years later, when Catherine of Aragon miscarried again and again, Henry saw more than dead infants. He saw Arthur. He saw his mother's death. He saw the fragility his father had feared. Each loss whispered the same message: the Tudors were cursed. Without a male heir, their dynasty would not survive. Henry VIII's quest for a male heir became an obsession. When the Pope refused his divorce, Henry shattered centuries of tradition. He broke from Rome, made himself head of the church, dissolved monasteries, executed advisors who disagreed, including Thomas More. He married 6 times. 2 wives he beheaded. Religious violence consumed England for generations. Catholics and Protestants tore the country apart, all because a 15-year-old boy died in 1502. So what killed Arthur Tudor? For 5 centuries, people have debated this. Contemporary accounts described a malign vapor from the air, the sweating sickness, a disease that made victims feel like their blood was boiling. Modern historians have suggested tuberculosis, pneumonia, influenza, or the English sweating sickness that killed thousands in periodic outbreaks. Some even suggested testicular cancer, though that doesn't explain why Catherine got sick too. The truth is, we'll probably never know. Medieval medical knowledge was limited, descriptions were vague. All we know for certain is that something struck Arthur down in March 1502, and 6 days later, he was dead. 2002, exactly 500 years later. Scientists brought ground-penetrating radar to Worcester Cathedral, seeking Arthur's remains. Arthur's body isn't buried in the beautiful stone tomb visitors see. That's just a memorial. His actual body lies in a vault beneath, slightly to the side of the monument. The vault is filled with soil and rubble. Remember, Arthur was buried in a wooden chest. After 5 centuries, that wood is gone. His bones are scattered in the dirt beneath the cathedral floor. The scientists didn't open the vault. It would require permission from the Queen, but they confirmed he's almost certainly still there, the boy who should have been king, resting in darkness. Henry VIII built Arthur's tomb in 1504. It's magnificent, a small chapel attached to the cathedral's choir, with elaborate buttresses, carved figures in canopied niches, pierced stonework creating windows, a rich parapet and pinnacles. Inside, the east end features elaborate tabernacle work with more carved saints. The figures are mutilated now, probably damaged during the Protestant Reformation under Edward VI, but the tomb survived mostly intact. It is one of England's most beautiful monuments, a testament to hope that died too young. Imagine if Arthur had lived. Imagine the mysterious disease had spared him, that Catherine recovered and her husband survived. Arthur would have become king in 1509. Catherine would have been his queen. They